respected. I thank you.
Representative of France for the statement, and now give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I thank Pakistan for convening this meeting. I would also like to thank Assistant Secretary General Yensa and Assistant Secretary General Musuyev for their briefings. Mr. President, since the beginning of this war 3.5 years ago, the collective voice of the international community has repeatedly condemned Russia's violation of Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity, and has been calling on Russia to fully respect international law, the UN Charter, and relevant General Assembly resolutions. These calls were strengthened with renewed conviction since the launching of the US-led peace initiative. Sadly, as we have just heard from our briefers, the war is not ending. On the contrary, for yet another month, Russian forces have been attacking the cities of Ukraine, causing death and destruction. June has been the single deadliest month for Ukrainian civilians since at least May 2022, with the number of missiles and loitering munitions launched by Russia into Ukraine increasing tenfold from June 2024. Once more, the vulnerable, children, women, and the elderly are disproportionately affected, with 100 casualties among children alone. This trend has continued in July. These attacks have inter alia targeted energy infrastructure and disrupted power supply to the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant for the first time since December 2023, further endangering nuclear safety. We note with extreme concern that according to the WHO, nearly 40% of all attacks against healthcare facilities worldwide this year took place in Ukraine, causing casualties among medical personnel and patients. We are likewise concerned about reports on the use of chemical weapons on the battlefield. Greece joins the Secretary General in strong condemnation of the latest severe attacks by Russia against civilian population and infrastructure in Ukraine, and we also condemn any attacks against civilians which constitute blatant violations of international law, including humanitarian and human rights law. Mr. President, this year's annual report of the Secretary General on Children and Armed Conflict verified a 105% increase in grave violations against the children of Ukraine, identifying for the third consecutive year the Russian armed forces and affiliated armed groups as responsible for these violations. These findings are compounded by this year's recently released Council of Europe's report on the human rights situation in the territories of Ukraine temporarily occupied by Russia, which demonstrates that Russia's war of aggression has continued to lead to immense human suffering. Mr. President, ensuring accountability is both a prerequisite for peace and a deterrent for further war. On that front, Greece welcomes the July 9th ruling of the European Court of Human Rights, in which the court held Russia unanimously accountable for flagrant and widespread abuses of at least 10 fundamental human rights in eastern Ukraine between 2014 and at least 2022. Greece also welcomes the signing of the agreement between the Council of Europe and Ukraine for the establishment of a special tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine. Mr. President, we have long advocated for peace, which is long overdue. We welcome the 3 rounds of direct bilateral talks and the agreements on exchange of prisoners, including the most recent one on July 23rd. However, we regret that peace efforts have not produced any other tangible results and have eventually stalled. We reiterate that no peace effort can have any substantial results if hostilities continue. Therefore, it is imperative that any peace efforts should be approached in good faith, starting by agreeing to an immediate and unconditional ceasefire as the first step towards a comprehensive, just and lasting peace, in line with international law and the UN Charter, and in full respect of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for the statement. Now give the floor to the representative of the Republic of